Hey guys, it's Sign here with HobbiesofaMan. Once again, and today we're going to be doing another comic book review. Today we're going to be looking at Supermassive 2024. This is the most recent crossover event between all of the different Massiverse titles. This includes Shift and Radiant Black and Radiant Red and Radiant Yellow and Pink as well. It also features Inferno Girl Red. It also features Dead Lucky and Rogue Sun. So most of those are Radiant Black title characters. But all of the other ones that I mentioned, Dead Lucky, Rogue Sun, and Inferno Girl Red have their own series. You can catch up to them. Actually, I think that this is the first time that you actually need to be sort of caught up to the story in order to understand what's going on here. And sadly, I'm not, because I need to be caught up to Radiant Black, and I'm not actually caught up to Radiant Black. It's the only series that I don't actively follow issue by issue. And so that made my reading experience here significantly worse. If you don't mind anyways, and you're a little bit confused, I recommend you guys actually check out the Radiant Black podcast. They did an episode about this, and they go through it for like an hour, and they talk about all of the things, and because they know what's going on in the story currently, they help you kind of navigate the story a bit. I actually watched that before recording this video because I read this, and I was like, damn, I'm gonna, shit all over this. I don't think I'm gonna enjoy reviewing this because I'm not sure that I enjoyed reading it. And then I was like, maybe it's because I'm lost. Maybe it's because I need more information. And it turns out that that is the case, right? So if you're not caught up, but you still want to read this, it'll be fine. Like, you won't necessarily be extremely lost. It's pretty clear what's going on, but it's not the best reading experience, right? Because you're not really understanding a lot of the emotional moments, a lot of the cool stuff that's happening, because you might not know what's going on, right? And that definitely felt like that for me. I mean, I enjoyed it because I still enjoyed seeing the characters that I like interacting with each other, but it wasn't the same level of enjoyment that I would have gotten if this was something that I was caught up to, right? And that's kind of disappointing because usually, at least in the first two, you didn't really need to know what was going on in the mainline series to understand the crossover, because it was just like a thing that was happening. And mostly that's because the first two, I think, focused on introducing characters, whereas this one is about continuing on the story, right? And so because of the difference in the focus of the story being told in Supermassive, you get that difference, right? And so this is probably not for new fans of the universe, so I don't recommend it for you. But if you're someone that has some passing knowledge about this, I think you'll be fine with this, right? And I fit more into the super fan category than the kind of casual fan category when it comes to the Massiverse, but I still had some difficulty with this, right? So my initial opinion of this book was actually pretty negative, and negative for me means that I thought it was like a 3 out of 5 instead of like a 5 out of 5. And I mean, that means it's average, so it's not necessarily bad. But I did feel like I was missing out on stuff, and I felt like this wasn't really clear. And mostly, I really felt like I needed an introduction page that told me, hey, this is what's happening so far, so you guys kind of understand, then get into the story. And there wasn't one. So that's kind of disappointing. I think that that's a big oversight because, at this point, the Massiverse has been going on for 3 years. So I understand why the creators might think, okay, well, anyone that's, reading this probably knows what's going on. At the same time, because of comic books and the way that comic books work, any comic book can be someone's first comic book. And so when you're doing something like this that's kind of heavy in lore and kind of needs you to understand the storyline, I think it's best to assume that people that are reading this might not know what's going on, and to give them that extra page of context, right? And the fact that they missed here, that they didn't put that, is kind of a big negative in my book. That doesn't necessarily have to do with my reading experience. It's just like the ergonomics, I guess you could call it, of the issue were hit pretty badly, right? Beyond that, the story is pretty simple. It's an interdimensional heist type story. A character summons another character. This character is told, I need you to settle a team, and I need you to go into this other universe and find something, right? And then this second character that was introduced gathers a team, and then they go and they find something, and it turns out that it's not something, it's a someone. And then they had to fight their way back to the main universe, right? And broadly speaking, it's really easy to understand, but because of the mechanics of the Supermassive crossover and the mechanics that are happening in the Radiant Black series right now, between issues 29 and 29.5, if I remember correctly from the Radiant Black podcast, that means that you kind of have to know what's going on. And if you don't, you're kind of playing catch up as you're reading, and that's kind of hard to do, right? And it makes it a little bit less enjoyable, right? So yeah, there you go. I'm gonna stop repeating myself now. So let's start actually looking at what happened in this book, right? So it opens on North Africa, or sorry, in Namibia. So I guess that's not North Africa. It's somewhere in the middle, I think. And it opens up with an elephant, and then Shift is there, and then Radiant Pink, who has teleportation powers, shows up to bring him with her to see Radiant Yellow, whose name is Wendell. And Wendell has like Doctor Strange, Eye of Agamotto powers, right? He has the ability to kind of see different things and to split himself into multiples and, you know, do sort of stuff. He has some sort of clairvoyance type ability, right? And he's ahead of the game, actually, like literally he's ahead of what's going on in the timeline. And so his conversation with Shift is out of timing, and it's really confusing, but eventually they figure out what's going on, and, you know, they get to the point. Wendell sends Shift to gather a team to go to the other universe that's, you know, tied into the main storyline of Catalyst War, which is the main event that's happening in the Radiant Black series right now. And he needs to go there because they need to go save something. They need to go find something. And so we get to see that Shift goes down to Radiant Red. He tells her, hey, I need you to help me. She's like, I don't want to. And then he's like, well, the people that you care about are here, so we have to make sure that this place survives, right? She gets convinced and she joins him. Then Shift goes down to California, to San Francisco, which means that he went to see Vivi, or Dead Lucky, and he manages to convince her to go with him, especially after he talks about Inferno Girl Red. Turns out that Inferno Girl Red is the girl that inherits the powers of Thomasin, who is the woman from the previous Supermassive, who Vivi had like a very short fling with that was implied during that story. And so she decides that she wants to go help as well. Then he goes down to New Orleans to talk to Rogue Sun, and Rogue Sun is immediately like, yeah, okay, I'll join. And Shift is like taken aback. He's like, are you sure? You don't want me to convince you? He's like, no, dude, you need to fight people, and I'm ready to do that. Let's go team up. And so they do, and all four of these characters end up going to Chicago, and they end up traversing to the other timeline. We don't know how, but they do. They end up there, and they're doing this like old school kind of heist thing where they're jumping on a plane. They're going through the plane, and then from the plane they jump off to the roof of this place. And they fight sorry, I was gonna say monsters, but no, that's not true. They fight some robots, and then we get the cool title card here. This is very similar to Invincible, so I think that's pretty fun, right? If this ever turned into a cartoon like the Invincible show, this would be the time where it like katunks and then it turns into Invincible. That'd be really cool. I think that's fun. And broadly speaking, I want to take a moment here to talk about the artwork here. In general, there's a lot of artists working on this. There's like too many. Yeah, Simone, I think, is the one that does most of the main work, but I don't necessarily like their art style that much, especially when it focuses in on people. It's a bit too abstract for me. However, when it's like, you know, broad strokes there like that, you know, where you don't really necessarily need to know what the people look like. You just need to know that they're people and then they have different colors. That way it works really, really nicely, right? And so there was this kind of constant balancing act in my head where I was like, oh, this is really cool. Oh, this is kind of lame. Oh, this is really cool. Oh, this doesn't look great. You know, and it was pretty funny that I had to go through this the whole time. But overall, I think it's not my favorite, but ultimately you get used to it and then you enjoy it, right? And you know, when it's moments like this, it's so cool, man, right? Like, you know, Radiant Red over there doing crazy stuff with her, you know, powers. Shift in this really crazy focus. You know, Dead Lucky over there with like a Spider-Man pose. It just looks so cool. Rogue Sun flying all over the place, which is really fun. And so they managed to make it to this building. Radiant Red falls and Rogue Sun saves her, and then he kind of quips about this. He's like, oh God, you're saved by a child. That must be so embarrassing, because she was mad at him earlier for the fact that everyone can fly except her, right? And it was pretty funny. That's probably my favorite part of this book. It's all of the bickering between the characters, all of the funny interactions. It feels not necessarily like Marvel, but it has that kind of vibe, and it's really fun and enjoyable, and I really like it, right? So they managed to get to this roof. They managed to get inside this place, and then they go all the way down to this lab, and it turns out that inside this lab is Inferno Girl Red. They managed to wake her up, she is excited and, you know, upset and angry, and she doesn't know what's going on. She transforms, you know, she henshins or whatever. She yells Inferno Girl or Inferno Ignite right there. And now she's fighting Rogue Sun. And eventually she calms down. They figure out what's going on. The robots attack them, so they jump off this hole that they made. And we get another cool, you know, splash page there. Well, this isn't really a splash page, but you get what I'm saying, right? You get this cool action sequence that looks really fun. And then they power down to try to hide away, right? As this is happening, we get to see that Radiant Black, who now looks more like Radiant White because he's absorbed the powers of everyone else, and he has this new, like, I don't know what to call it, but basically, like, if he's black and he has gravity powers, and all of the other ones have different colors and they have different powers, and he absorbs them, he's absorbing different types of light, right? And when it comes to digital lighting, I think, and natural lighting, but not paint, when you combine all the colors, you get white, right? So I think that's what's happening with him. Even if it's not necessarily like explained that way, that's kind of what this is, right? Or that what this reference is. And he's glitchy as hell. I don't know why. And he's the only Radiant left. But then Existence tells him, hey, there's 2 Radiants here. What's going on? And he doesn't believe him, but then Existence is like, I know the truth. There was 2 of you here. What the fuck's going on? He realizes that something's happening. And so he goes off to find this other Radiant. As this is happening, after they power down, they tell, you know, Inferno Girl Red what's going on. She talks about the fact that when she went to her world, because she's not from the main Massiveverse Earth, she saw that their world was split in 2. And that it was confusing to her, but, you know, it's important. And then Radiant Black finds them, he attacks them, and basically it turns out that he basically needs Inferno Girl Red's crystal because it allows her to transport herself across timelines, and he needs it in order to return to the original timeline to try to make things better. So he's kind of this, you know, he's just doing crazy stuff because he thinks he has a reason to do so, but in fact, his reasons are, although understandable, maybe not the right reaction. And so he's going to cause catastrophe instead of like saving anything or anyone because of his actions, right? And this is a problem. So Radiant Black shows up. Turns out it's Marshall. And Cassia and BB try to talk him down to try to get him to relax. And it kind of works. But then everyone powers up. Awesome page. Although the gutter loss makes it a bit worse than it could have been. But, you know, it is what it is. Looks good anyways. And then he starts fighting them. And they take another break to try to talk him down again. And this is when his powers kind of get out of control. They attack Cassia, and then they sucker punch Radiant Black. And he's down on the ground. He's kind of not knocked out, but he's kind of weak for whatever reason. I'm not really sure what's going on. I think they just sucker punched him strongly enough that it affected him, like his physical body. And Shift is about to murder him, right? And this is why Shift was on this team, because he's not necessarily the only one capable of doing it, but he's definitely the one that would hesitate the least. And as he's getting ready to do this, he gets murdered by the Radiant Black energy, right? Big death. However, because at the beginning of the story, we were told by Wendell that Existence will still have to deal with his personal brand of annoyance, we know that there's something going on, and it turns out that Radiant Red actually went to the prison where this version of Shift is, and she brings him back with her. Then they save all of the people that they can in this timeline. They bring them back with Wendell's powers. And then it turns out that the Radiant Black from the other timeline is starting to attack the main timeline. And so everyone has to join the fight to help our Radiant Black, the good guy, fight. And then they go off to do this, you know, cool action-y stuff. And overall, fun story. Like I said, it's a bit confusing because I don't know all of the parts. Like, I'm caught up with Dead Lucky, I'm caught up with Red Sun, I know what's going on with Inferno Girl Red. I don't know anything about the Radiant Black stuff, though, because I've only read the first volume. And so I'm kind of lost on that side of things, but broadly speaking, it wasn't so bad that I had no clue what was going on. It was just like difficult to enjoy the reading experience because I had to constantly figure out what was going on as I was reading, right? And it wasn't like I had to go look up anything. Like everything is still explained within the story. It's just like the reading experience was deeply hampered by the fact that I didn't know what was going on, right? So I deeply, deeply recommend that if you want to read this, you do so after you read up to issue 29.5 of Radiant Black. I think that's the last one that released, right? Or maybe it was 29. I can't remember exactly, but I recommend that you're caught up to that. You don't necessarily need to know much about Rogue Sun or Dead Lucky or Inferno Girl Red, to be honest. Everything that you need to know about them is explained clearly here. It's just that it's happening while a larger story is happening, and so you won't know what's going on in that sense. So yeah, 3.5 out of 5 for me for this book. It's confusing. It's not very great because I'm not caught up to it, but it's broadly okay. To be fair, I think this is the worst Supermassive book that we've had in terms of like the crossover events, right? The first one was really fun. It had a lot of cool stuff going on, and it had that really awesome splash page poster thing that would open up when the 3 characters transformed. So that one was my favorite. Book 2 was actually really great because it was like a fantasy story within a more sciencey kind of tokusatsu based type kind of thing. It was more like, it was like if a group of Sentai teams went to visit the Garo world. That's kind of what it felt like, and it was pretty fun. And it was also very, out of continuity. Like you didn't need to know anything except who Rogue Sun was, and so that was pretty fun. So those were really easy to read and get into, and it worked as a first comic for anyone. This one fails at that. However, this probably delivers very well for people that are caught up to the whole Massiverse, right? I just don't happen to be one of them. So there you go. I'm going to stop repeating myself at this point because I think I've said the same thing like 7 times. It is what it is. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please give a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you thought. And also, like I said, if you want a more in-depth analysis of this, go check out the Radiant Black podcast. I recently found them, and I think that they're really cool, right? So yeah, go check that out instead. If you found that I didn't give you enough details, right? But yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, and see you guys later.